And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers defeat Liberty 87-48 at Simon Scott Assembly Hall in a game that was truly never in doubt, as Indiana jumped out to a huge early lead, led 36-7 at one point in the second half, or in the first half, and cruised to the easy victory. My bold prediction on our radio show was a 40-point victory, and the Hoosiers came oh so close. If Tim Priller could have just made one of those free throws there at the end of the game, the Hoosiers would have won by 40. But it was also a game that was marred by one very, very, very huge negative, which, of course, we will talk about on this episode of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. I am your host, Jared Morris. I will be joined this evening by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we will begin tonight, as we always do, with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And the banner moment came in the first half, and I thought Indiana really came out tonight and just played really, really hard with a lot of effort and played terrific on the defensive end of the floor. And I thought OG Anunoby really keyed that. And, there are a couple big highlight plays that he had in the first half, a couple huge blocks. The Indiana Twitter account tweeted out that cool 3D look at one of his blocks, and he swatted it out into the stands. But I thought there was another play that showed just the subtle attention to detail and defensive instincts that OG has that make him such a great defender. And there was a play where Liberty had the ball out toward the top of the key, and they dumped it inside to a guy. And just because of Indiana's defensive rotations, everything was a little bit discombobulated. But OG made a great rotation over to the block and was able to challenge the shot. And what would have been a wide open layup against Indiana, maybe early last season or the season before, was a contested shot, ended up missing. And it was all because OG saw what was happening on the opposite end of the court, made a great, smart rotation over, and then, of course, has the athleticism and the length to alter the shot. And it's those kinds of defensive plays, number one, that allow this team, as we've talked about before, to kind of hide a guy like James Blackman Jr. a little bit more and not be so taken advantage of when he maybe has some of his defensive lapses. But it's just those little things on a possession-by-possession basis that I think are going to make this team a really good defensive team. And I know that the numbers didn't look great against Kansas, and the defense on the whole wasn't great against UMass Lowell. But the big positive to take tonight was how good Indiana was on the defensive end. And I thought that moment in particular really stood out to me because we have such a terrific individual defender in a guy like OG Anunoby. Those are the kind of plays that help you win Big Ten championships down the road. And those are the kind of plays that can help you move on from one round of the NCAA tournament to the next. Just those subtle little things plays. And OG, I thought we'll talk about him. I thought he did the big things well, the little things well. It was really a terrific night all around for OG Anunoby. Alrighty. So, as always, tonight's banner moment brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based brand by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. Connor and the team at Hoosier Proud offer a line of T-shirts and accessories that are unmatched for anyone who wants a unique, stylish way to display their own pride in being a Hoosier. Check them out at HoosierProud.com and use the promo code ASSEMBLY to receive a 15% discount on your entire order. That's promo code ASSEMBLY to receive 15% off at HoosierProud.com. All righty, let's move the ball, get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. Andy, we will go to you for your bottoms line on tonight's IU victory.
Well, I might as well address the elephant in the room with the turnovers, and that was really, the only negative or one of the few negatives you could come up with in a game where IU never trailed. But 26 turnovers for the game, and that was with only 9 in the second half. And I guess only 9 doesn't sound very good for a half, but when you have 17 in the first half, I guess it feels like an improvement. If you look at IU's points per possession, on the possessions where they didn't turn the ball over, it was 1 point. I think it finished at 1.64, 1.65, something like that, which is really impressive. There was a while it was hovering around 2 at that point, and it was just, I know you mentioned this on Twitter a little bit that you thought some of the early ones were just trying too hard, effort based. I think those quickly transitioned into just sloppiness and things like that, and I guess that's to be expected to a certain extent in a game like this where you're up so much for so long. But that was really going to be the story and something you can't get away with in other games. Now, I did point out that Liberty came into the game fifth in defensive turnover rate, according to Ken Palm. So IU doing their best to push Liberty up to number one. We'll see where they shake out after this game. But, that is something they do. Their coach came from, was at Virginia for a while and instituted the same pack line defense they run there. I think some of that gave IU trouble as they, committed a bunch of charges and a lot of turnovers by the baseline, which that defense is going to do. But, that being said, it's pretty rough to watch some of that when it was feast or famine, truly, when the offense was a well-oiled machine, when they could hang on to the ball long enough to get a shot up.
All righty. Well, Ryan, it is time for your rant, brought to us by thebiglead.com. Andy took the turnovers, but, on a night like tonight when the turnovers are so bad, feel free to rant about them again if you like.
I think that it's just sloppiness in general was what I took away from this game. Look, Indiana completely dominated there, so what we're doing here is nitpicking, because when you win by 39, you shoot almost 61% from the field, you out-rebound the other team 55-20. You got to find problems with it, and there were, and this is Indiana beating a team, destroying a team it should destroy, but it was sloppy, and it was not what I'm sure Tom Crean wanted to see. I mean, Thomas Bryant by himself had 7 turnovers. James Blackman Jr. had 5. Josh Newkirk had 4. Those are guys who should not be turning the ball over. Those are guys who are going to have the ball in their hands a lot, and they cannot be doing that. Now, I get it. The pack line defense is designed for that, and Indiana tried to work inside out more tonight, something we've been harping on them, but against a pack line defense, that's really difficult. And that was what, they walked sort of right into what the pack line sort of dares you to do is drive on it. And where Indiana made its money to really start opening the defense up was when it started finally hitting some threes. So yeah, it was sloppy, but at the same time, it's a Saturday night game in the non-conference against a relatively awful team. But to be fair, if they go on the road to, Fort Wayne and come out slow and sluggish and don't, engage and don't make the smart plays and turn the ball over a bunch, you never know what's going to happen on the road early in the season. So this team needs to have some more bounce in its step. The crowd was, I thought, for the most part, awful tonight at Assembly Hall. It was just dead silent. So that didn't help, especially when you've got a young team without a central guy yet who's stepped up to be the emotional heart. I know Thomas Bryant's getting there, but he can't be the only guy. And so I just think that there were a couple things working against Indiana in this one, and the Hoosiers kind of played into that and lost focus, lost concentration. And you're right, Jared, early on, those turnovers were aggressive turnovers, and generally I'm fine with them. But later in the second half, it was a lot of carelessness, and that has to change. So I have a feeling these guys are going to be running a lot of suicides or sprints or something this week, because 26 turnovers is just far too many for anybody.
No, it is. And that's, to me, what's frustrating about this game, because I really felt like this team came out to kick some ass tonight. I mean, they really did. And getting out to that 36-7 lead, again, the defense was terrific. So it's not like they just came out and weren't kind of paying attention to, to detail, that kind of thing. Those early turnovers really trying to do too much, but it did then evolve into sloppiness. So here's my question for you guys. Because, I think part of that was the opposition just wasn't putting up much resistance, and you get up 36-7 on a Saturday night, you lose a little bit of focus. But there's a lot of these games coming up, and the problem is, if you get into bad habits in these games, it might carry over. You can't just flip a switch, turn it over 26 times tonight, and then go and play Fort Wayne and expect that everything is going to be different because now you're on the road. Sure, I'm sure Indiana's not going to turn over 30+% of the time. It'll normalize itself some. But we've talked about how important it is for this team to get the turnovers back under 20%, and they feel so far away from that now. So, Ryan, what do you do when you have so many games like this where even if Indiana comes out those 10, 15 minutes, you're ready to play, you're amped up as Indiana was tonight, but you're getting no resistance on the other end? You've got to find a way to still maintain your focus and keep those good habits. And I just fear with how many games we have coming that are like this, I fear this team getting into bad habits.
Well, I think this is actually where it pays off to have some talented freshmen, because you can work other guys in who, look, a freshman's going to be excited to get in the game no matter what. It's a college game. It's still early in the season. They're not going to be used to just walking out there and having it work for them. So you get guys like Devontae Green and Curtis Jones in the game, you're probably going to get a higher level of focus. And it's not that, I don't want to put this out there like these guys aren't focusing on purpose or they're taking it for granted. It's just hard to get up for a game like this. It is. It's human
But they were
nature.
up for the game. That's what I'm saying. They were up
I think it was a methodical performance early on. I don't think this was shot out of a cannon. I think defensively, they were playing really smart and they were playing together and playing a very connected game defensively. I thought offensively, it was very methodical, which can be good. But when you're turning the ball over, I don't know. I just felt like it was a lot of guys were flat-footed offensively. And that's okay with this team because they're so good offensively that you can produce when it's like that. But at the same time, then I think that bleeds into other things. And that's how you started getting some of those turnovers later in the half. I think it was more workmanlike than explosive. And against a team like Liberty, you want to get up and you want to put them away early. And they did, but at the same time, they didn't put them away early with great habits. And so, as you said, those bad habits sort of bleed into other things. And I think that's how you got those turnovers. They weren't throwing the ball into the post early. I know, again, the defense was daring you, hey, throw it down here. We've got like 4 guys around the post. Let's try it. And that's why you got Thomas Bryant turning the ball over so much. So I think, again, the best way to do that is to use the bench as a tool. And we've seen Tom Crean not shy about subbing guys because there's not much of a drop-off between the first and second teams. And he didn't really have Juwan Morgan to use as a tool off the bench tonight since he started. But I think that's the way you have to do it is, hey, if a guy's losing focus, put his butt on the bench, not as a punishment, but just talk to him, get him refocused, and then, use the younger guys who are going to be more hyped up and amped up. So that's my perspective on it. I know they had a huge lead and they played well defensively, but I just didn't feel like this team was super engaged offensively early on.
Yeah, I mean, I saw what you did, Jared, to start, where it did seem like they were really locked in. I even noticed like James Blackman seemed to really be in a little bit better stance and pressuring the ball a little bit differently early in the game. And then, when you look at Liberty stats coming into the game, I mean, they shoot one of the top, percent of their shots come from 3-point range. We saw that tonight, and especially early on when they just kept jacking up threes and they didn't make a lot. They're almost dead last in offensive rebounding percentage, so they didn't really go to the glass very well. So I think everything you saw from Liberty is kind of what you expected. And then IU, even it seemed like they would either turn the ball over or score, were pretty much the only two options. And so with that, Liberty shot so poorly, they got out ahead. It's easy to fall into those habits, but yeah, I think there's got to be some kind of setting other goals within the game for the team. And I know Crean talked about that last year where they had to run. If they had over a certain amount of turnovers in the game. I mean, that feels like do you need to get back to that point? Maybe they're already doing it. I don't really know, but trying to do those kinds of things and say your opponent is yourself in some of these cases. It's not necessarily the team across from you, and trying to figure that out, because I think if they can do that, they become that much more explosive. I mean, they were scoring at will, and I think we talked about that after the UMass Lowell game. It seemed like they could score whenever they wanted, and they knew it. And so if they took a bad shot or they made a bad turnover, they felt very confident that they'd be able to get it back right away. And I agree. There's some good things you can take from these games like this, and the ability to experiment with different lineups and show your team different styles and things like that. But there's also some negatives in terms of the habits that you can fall into and get away with in these games that you're not going to be able to later.
Only 2 Hoosiers played 20 or more minutes and turned it over fewer than 3 times. And we are going to talk about those 2 Hoosiers next, because they both, I thought, played very, very good games tonight. But first, I do want to take a quick minute and tell you about our sponsor, SeatGeek, who we're so happy to have back with us for a second season of the Assembly Call. Buying tickets online for sports and concerts has been a confusing process for a long time, as you know, as we've been talking about on these shows. It's always been hard to find the best deal for that game or show that you want to go to, and none of those older ticket sites seem to want to change that, but SeatGeek is different. They've come along and created an amazing app and website that really does make it easier than ever for fans to buy and sell tickets. SeatGeek is the first place I go when I'm looking for tickets to a game or concert, because everything about SeatGeek is designed to make life easier for sports and music fans. They do all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that you get the best possible deal. They do the work, you save the time and money, and best of all, our listeners get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. Here's how you get that. download the SeatGeek app and go, and it's a free app, either iOS or Android. Go to the settings tab and click add a promo code and enter the promo code assembly, ASSEMBLY. SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. I've had several people tweeting me, showing me how they're using the promo code. That's awesome. Definitely do that. When you use the promo code, send us a tweet at Assembly Call. It's always cool to see. Again, download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code assembly today. Alrighty, well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And if you heard our opening segment, you might not realize that Indiana won by 39 points tonight. We spent some time harping on the turnovers, and our tone might have sounded a little bit more negative than sometimes it is, and we come on here after a victory. And so let's go to some of the positives tonight, because I thought two guys really, really stood out to me as playing really strong games. And we're going to start in reverse order of turnovers. I think that's appropriate for a night like tonight. And we're going to go to Robert Johnson. And of course, we'll let Andy lead off talking about Robert Johnson. But, he only had one turnover. And we know he's been a guy the last 2 years that has been among the highest Hoosiers in terms of turnover rate. And he's really doing a good job early this season of limiting turnovers and of being really efficient offensively. He scored 13 points on 7 shots. He had 3 assists, and frankly, he should have had 5 or 6. There was one beautiful bounce pass he made to Thomas Bryant that Thomas couldn't complete the catch and complete the shot. But man, that was a beautiful pass. But Robert has just been rock solid. He's been setting the tone defensively. He's been really good offensively. Andy, you're our resident Robert Johnson expert and number one fan. What did you think of his performance tonight? Because I thought he played really well.
Yeah, it was another good one. It's funny, in a game like tonight, Blackman ended up with 20, and then there was a bunch of guys in that 6 to 10 point range, and then Johnson had 13. So it was a pretty balanced effort from everybody. But I definitely thought he stood out. I was shocked when he made a turnover, kind of mid to late second half, and realized that was his first one. I assumed that everyone who had been playing longer at that point already had 3, but like you said, I thought he did a good job of picking his spots. He had some really nice drives, going to his left and getting into the lane. And it seems like he's doing a good job of balancing the facilitator role, but also being able to score. And I think, that was a question for me, as much as a fan of his as I've been, coming into the season of, everybody's, how do you replace Yogi? All those questions out there. And it would be easy for a guy like him to really try to go too much one way or the other. And that was what made Yogi so good, last year, that he was able to balance those responsibilities in terms of running the offense and setting up other guys, but also picking his spots to score. So Rojo isn't quite in that echelon of IU players at this point, but I think he's doing a good job of being able to get teammates involved, taking the openings when they're there, and taking smart shots. And he didn't miss a 2-point shot tonight. Missed his 2 misses were both in 3-point range, but he's really shooting it confidently from there as well. And if he can take good care of the basketball, even on a night like tonight when the turnovers were contagious, I think that's a great sign for IU, because he gives them some stability at that position that was definitely a question coming into the season.
Once again, he was atop the list of plus minus for Indiana. And I know I mentioned on our radio show that Juwan Morgan is going to be the guy who's going to end up on every single glue guy list this season. But Robert Johnson should be too, because he is truly a glue guy on this team. Ryan, let's talk about OG Anunoby, because, we've talked about on the last couple shows how, OG needs to not fall in love with being a 3-point shooter and really work to get the ball inside. And I thought OG was really, really good tonight offensively. He only took the 1 3. But I thought he was really good for the most part, being effective off the dribble. He only had 2 turnovers, obviously in a game marred by them. He had an assist. So, there was one sequence of possessions in the first half where on one possession, he drove in, took a couple dribbles, and found James Blackman Jr. for a wide open 3. And then on the next possession, got the ball on the block, made a nice little spin move for a bucket. And I thought really showed some of his, newfound varied offensive game. And tried to do some different things, almost like he was kind of working on some things. 10 points, 11 rebounds, 3 of them offensive, and the 2 blocks. I thought he really played a good all-around game.
Yeah, and I thought he was everywhere defensively as well. I thought that this was, sort of, again, a couple, and I've heard some people say, why isn't he scoring more? Well, I'm not sure he's going to be a guy that's going to drop 20, or he's going to be a guy who sort of fills the stat sheet. And that's what he was last year, too. I mean, this is who he is. I think that he'll be better offensively, but I'm not expecting 15 points a game from OG Anunoby. I'm expecting him to do everything you need to win a basketball game. So when you see him with 10 points, I think some people are like, oh, he's being hyped as an NBA draft pick. Why isn't he scoring more? Well, because of everything else he does, that doesn't need to be part of it. Like you said, you have James Blackman Jr. scoring. You've got Robert Johnson dropped 13 tonight. You had a bunch of guys in that 6 to 10 range as well. You don't need him to score 15 points to every game. But the 11 rebounds, 2 blocks, being everywhere. I mean, he alters so many shots that don't show up statistically. And yeah, I thought it was better from him that he looked to get more to the rim. We saw some nice post moves from him early on, getting an easy layup. I think that's more his game than I think being a standing shooter. I think that the 3-pointers are going to be part of what he does, but he also needs to concentrate on, look, we've got guys who can shoot, and he's certainly one of them. But I think that he's at his best when he's attacking the rim and is getting easy buckets inside, because with those long arms, if he jumps at all, he's going to have an easy path to the rim, or he's going to get fouled, one of the two. Also, he was 2 of 4 from the free throw line. Needs to get better at that. He needs to make his free throws. We're going to harp on that for everybody this year. I think free throws are going to wind up being incredibly important for this team, and so leaders like him have to make their free throws, and that's something that I'm going to keep leaning on for him, because he's going to go to the line a lot because he's so difficult to guard with his size and length.
A couple other positives, and Andy, feel free to take any of these and expound on them. We don't want to take James Blackman Jr. for granted. 20 points, efficient again. He was 5 of 10 from downtown, also had 9 rebounds, did have the 5 turnovers, but another strong scoring night from James Blackman Jr. Juwan Morgan was out there doing Juwan Morgan things. 7 points, 8 boards, 3 of them offensive. One thing you notice about Juwan, watch the timing of his jumps when he attacks a rebound. He has impeccable timing. He's not a great leaper in terms of height and athletic ability, but he makes up for it with timing. Watch that, because it's really impressive. I thought,
sorry to jump in, I think he's going to lead the team in rebounding this year. I do. Yeah. I think that you're right.
He's just so damn aggressive too.
And he's taller. He's bigger than people give him credit for, because he's out there handling the ball, but he's tall, he's strong. And you're right. He has that timing thing that guys like, this is obviously not a comparison to him, but a guy like Dennis Rodman had that innate sense of when to go for the basketball. Tyler Hansbrough was that way too with North Carolina. There's just some guys. I mean, I could list a million guys that had that, but those are the first 2 that come to mind.
Yeah, but could you have chosen 2 that are more polar opposite than Tyler Hansbrough and Dennis Rodman?
Probably, but I'm just trying to get you to imagine a combination of those 2 men.
Fuse them together, and you have Juwan Morgan.
Tyler Hansbrough with all those tattoos. That would be awesome. But no, I think that he has that innate sense on rebounding, and I think that it shows up rarely in guys. You get a couple of those guys with every group or class. Noah Vonleh was another guy who was great timing on rebounding as well.
Yeah, and Andy, the last guy I wanted to mention is Deron Davis. I thought it was another really strong outing from him. 6 points, 4 boards. The one thing I love about Deron is he really plays with a purpose on both ends. On offense, he sprints down and gets in position. He had a couple of really nice seals tonight. One in particular where James Blackman Jr. found him with a really pretty bounce pass. His defense is good. But those are 3 other guys who really stood out to me, Andy, that I thought had strong games.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Blackman, the 5 turnovers obviously don't look good from the box score perspective. He had those all pretty early. I want to say almost halfway through the first half, he might have already had 5. So he really settled in late in the second half. I think he ended up with 11 points in the first half, 9 in the second. And most of those 9 rebounds came in the first half as well. So I thought, after a pretty ugly start from him offensively, he bounced back nicely. You guys touched on Morgan. I mean, Davis just continues to play well. I'll kind of throw in the free throws for him as well. He was 2 of 5 from the line, but in 13 minutes, grabbed 4 rebounds, had 2 assists, continues to be a really good passer, found Grant Galen on a nice cut. And so, I think he continues to play well, and it's really allowed them to, obviously size isn't as big in some of these early season matchups, but you look down the list, Thomas Bryant only played 25 minutes. I think that's a good thing for some of these games, and a lot of guys were able to sit down. And I think that's well, obviously it's easy to put in whoever you want into a game where the margin is really wide. You can tell that trust is really starting to build up with these guys, and they're delivering. I mean, you look down the list of freshmen. Davis had, just if we look at turnovers, Davis only had one, Devontae Green only had one. He played 13 minutes. Curtis Jones only had one in 14 minutes. So, unfortunately, most of the culprits on the turnover front were not the new guys. But I think that's a good sign that they're already able to step in and maybe not fall into some of the same bad habits. But I definitely like what I saw from Davis and the other freshmen, which we'll probably get to a little bit later.
Hey, and Ryan, your boy Grant Galon came in, drained a three, and had a nice little basket cut. And I think, who was it? Was it Thomas Bryant that found him? Or no, Drawn Davis found him with a beautiful pass. And he had a nice little reverse layup. A good few minutes for Grant Galon, I thought.
I like what Grant brings. I'm glad they're not just going to redshirt him and bury him. I think that it's one of those. It's a situation where if injuries happen later in the year, he could be a guy who can really provide something off the bench. And
or for a Todd Leary situation in the NCAA tournament, perhaps.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, anytime you can bring up Todd Leary in a broadcast, it's great. But no, I thought it was good to get him involved, and he looked like he's another guy who just has a really good basketball sense.
All right, I want to talk about Thomas Bryant because I thought it was a very, very uneven night for Thomas Bryant. So we're going to talk about him here in just a second. But before we do that, I do want to take a quick minute and tell you why you should activate your free Assembly Call membership. Here are 3 reasons. Number 1, it's quick and easy. Go to assemblycall.com/join. It will take you 15 seconds. Number 2, it's how you get our best content. So by joining, you receive our 6-banner Saturday weekly IU News Roundups, as well as our detailed post-game analysis emails, which we get to work on as soon as the post-game show is done. And then it's also how you connect with us and with the Assembly Call community, because only members can access our moderated post-game live chat and our discussion forum. So if you like what you hear on the Assembly Call, becoming a member is the next logical step. Join us for free at assemblycall.com/join. All right, well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We are breaking down Indiana's 39-point victory over Liberty. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And guys, let's talk about the night for Thomas Bryant. He had 9 points, only 3 rebounds on a night when Indiana had 55 rebounds and absolutely dominated Liberty. I mean, we do need to talk about the rebounding at some point because Indiana's defensive rebounding percentage was 90.2%, and they continue to be aggressive on the offensive glass.
Is that good, Jared? I feel like that's good. Is that good?
It's good. It was also roughly equal to their turnover percentage. So yeah, it was very good. But Thomas also had 7 turnovers, several of them offensive fouls where he was just a little bit out of control. Also a couple that were horrible calls. So we do need to say that. But I have trouble evaluating Thomas in games like this. Is why I want to get your guys' thoughts. Because I feel like emotion is such a big part of how he plays. And I thought, he, like everybody else, was really keyed up early. But I feel like sometimes he struggles in these games once they become kind of a slog and they've kind of been decided. And I really kind of wish he wouldn't play so much in these games just because it always scares me that he's going to get hurt. But, not a great performance from him. And yet it really doesn't concern me that much because I know as soon as the bright lights shine against North Carolina, he's going to be perfectly fine and have a big game. So not a good performance, but yet he's probably the guy that I'm worried about the least in a game like this when he has a poor performance. Andy, what do you think about Thomas?
Yeah, it was funny. I mentioned the turnovers on Twitter at one point early in the game, and somebody came back. That was kind of the only thing to nitpick, and somebody came back and said, "Oh, Bryant only had 1 shot attempt at that point." And I think that's fair, but I don't know. I'm kind of like you. I find it hard to get as upset about that. I mean, he did only have 4 shot attempts, and 2 of those came from the 3-point line. Did get to the line 4 times, so there were some good things there. The turnovers were. I felt just like trying to do too much. Had some offensive fouls in there, and I think one of the reasons Crean talked about this a little bit after the UMass Lowell game. Trying to make Bryant and Deron Davis somewhat uncomfortable from a defensive perspective, just by having to play smaller guys. And I think that also has made him uncomfortable at times playing against smaller guys offensively when it feels like he should dominate them. He's trying to do more on the perimeter. And then, but this is a game when if you're really going to, do anything, it's got to be in the post. So some of those things aren't going to work, quite as well against a team without much size. So just kind of a weird game. I would agree with you that it doesn't concern me all that much. And a chance, like I said earlier, only 25 minutes. I would go along with your argument that maybe he didn't even need to play that much. So not worried, but I don't know that. I think we're going to see more of that as we get into some of these other games against some of the lower ranked teams on the schedule. Just for context, though, Liberty came in averaging only 9 point and an offensive rebound percentage of only 9.7. So in some regard, yeah, that's one of the lower ones I think I've ever seen. In looking at this, it ranks 348th out of I think 350.
And we gave him 9.8, so I guess that wasn't as good as I thought.
Did you really have to rain on the parade, Andy?
Everything was. That's just what I do. So everything in many regards was just how you expected it to look. But no, I mean, I still think it was good. But I mean, yeah, they just had times when they just sent absolutely, literally no one. It was like you jack up a three, the other four of us are going to run back down the court and not do anything.
I mean, Ryan, like when you look at this, do you think Thomas Bryant should be going out and getting 25 points and 15 rebounds in a game like this? Or, like what do you do with a performance like this in a game like this?
Well, okay, part of it is the fact that Liberty did everything they could just to take him away. Let's remember that, because that's a big deal. I mean, the pack line defense makes it really hard to throw the ball into the post, and they basically put everyone around him and made Indiana have everyone else beat him. You'd like to see him going out and dominating, but Indiana's getting scoring, so it's not an issue, really. I mean, that's kind of the nature of Tom Crean's teams. Well, I mean, when it's at its best, is that everybody has a piece of the action, and you don't have to rely on one person so much. And that's actually a positive, I think, that other people can win games for you and put you ahead. Now, we know what Thomas Bryant is capable of. We know what he should be doing, but this was a bad game. And remember, he's still only a sophomore. He's going to have off games. It's about everybody else stepping up, and you saw them do that tonight. And he only played 25 minutes. That's not – I know you kind of in a game like this would like to see him play less, Jared, but 25 is not that bad. I was surprised James Blackman Jr. played 30, but he was kind of feeling it for a little bit, and they played him a little more. But I think that it's not a positive. You're not exactly fired up about Thomas's performance, but it's also something to learn from, and something that in film this week he's going to get a talking to, and he's going to have to find out or figure out a way to be better at it. And so yeah, it's something to improve on, and these guys should always be improving and looking for ways to improve.
I thought another Hoosier that I was interesting to see, because he was in a new role. He'd started a couple of games, came off the bench tonight, was Josh Newkirk. And I thought really a poor performance from Josh. The first thing he did when he got out there was drain a three. And I thought that was nice to see, because it was the second straight game that he's looked pretty nice, shooting a three-pointer. But outside of that, and grabbing a few rebounds, he had 3 turnovers. He had that one really weird possession where, Indiana's up 30 and he's getting into a jawing match with the Liberty guy, and I think a double technical foul was assessed, and that was kind of strange. I think he lost a tooth. So, I mean, I hope that's okay. But just several possessions where, he was the guy that jumped out to me the most obvious as having a really loose handle on the offensive end, like really going a quarter step or a half step too fast. And without much of a purpose, too, which is, a little bit frustrating. So, Andy, your thoughts on Josh, who, so far this season, kind of up and down the performances that we've seen from him?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I thought it was pretty uneven. The jawing match with the guy at that point, it just seemed like he was trying to commit a foul for some reason. I mean, he bumped him once and they didn't call anything. They bumped him again, then kind of got into it with him. Just didn't really, it didn't really make sense to me. And he just seems to be overthinking almost everything. It feels like we talked about this with the shot at times, that you can just tell he's kind of thinking his way through, taking the shots. It feels like when you look at him sometimes, like just nothing is coming naturally to him. And so I think that's, I don't know if it's concerning at this point, but I think we've yet to figure out what exactly his role is on the team for a guy who's probably going to play a lot of minutes, maybe more than a lot of the other freshmen. But you've also got him, sliding into the mix with guys who have a bit more defined roles and a bit more defined contributions. And I think it's, maybe he's just struggling to figure out, am I the defensive stopper? Am I the point guard? Am I the penetrator? Like what are all the things that he can really do? And I think he's struggling a little bit to sort all that out. At least it seems that way to me. I think he'll be able to make contributions, but it feels like he's kind of in his own head a little bit at this point.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, that's to be expected. I mean, that's one of the things that we knew would be a struggle for this team early on, is a lot of guys in new roles, kind of shuffling that, juggling that. It's going to take a little while for those roles to figure out. And just because Indiana beat Kansas, it doesn't mean that everything is perfect. That is so nice. It kind of it adds a tint of sunshine to everything that happens. But there are still obviously issues with this team, and that's totally fine. It's early in the season, so it's really nice to be able to come on here and kind of feel like we're talking about guys struggling and maybe even being a little bit negative in tone. And Indiana has a win over Kansas in their back pocket. They're in the top 5 and they won by 39 points tonight. So that's a good spot to be in, a really good spot. A few guys that we haven't touched on that I want to get to before we get to last call. First off, I want to commend Freddie McSwain Jr. for not taking a field goal or shooting a field goal attempt tonight. Came in, got a couple of rebounds, did go to the free throw line, but had those 9 shots against UMass Lowell, which sent his usage rate through the roof. So that will normalize a little bit. Although I thought he struggled at defense and got exposed for being over-aggressive defensively. A couple shot fakes got him out of position. And if he's going to come in and be a defensive stopper, hustle guy, he can't be a big hole on defense that people can just attack. So that's going to be something to watch for. And then, Ryan, I thought Devontae Green really made an impression on me when he got in there. Didn't play a ton of minutes, but got in there. And as soon as he gets on in the game, and I've noticed this every time he's gotten in, he goes in and just puts pressure on the ball. He really digs in defensively, puts pressure on the ball, also completed a beautiful alley-oop from Curtis Jones. And, I mean, he's a short guy, Devontae Green, but he's shown us these last couple of games he's got some ups, some real athletic ability, and I think that bodes well for his future. So I thought he did some nice things tonight too.
Yeah, and his athleticism is there. It didn't really show up much on tape in his high school tape. He's much more athletic than he looked. I didn't get a chance to see him in person when he became an Indiana recruit, but he really has some athleticism. And you're right. That's the one thing about him you can always rely on. If he's going to miss a shot, if he's going to do whatever, doesn't matter. That kid will play defense and will be engaged defensively. And that has happened every time he's been on the floor. You've seen that the intensity picks up. And I think that with Curtis Jones and you're starting to see them sort of develop where they can both be on the floor tonight, or both be on the floor. And you saw that tonight. They can be on the floor together, and Tom Crean can trust them as freshmen to be out there together and run the offense and sort of keep the team engaged and correctly paced and all that stuff, that shows a lot of confidence in those two guys. But they seem like they both kind of have mature games, and they're not all about just jacking up shots and scoring points. They're about moving the ball and being engaged on both ends of the floor. And that's a huge positive considering they're freshmen and considering that's Indiana's future backcourt. So you've got to feel confident after seeing the way they've played together and separately when they've been in the game over these first 3 games.
Yeah, I think McSwain, I would echo what you said, Jared. He, fouled the one guy on a 3-pointer. There were a couple other times he helped off and his guy got shot. So I think it just, we talked about how raw he really was. Really good athlete coming out, but, a guy who's got a lot to learn from a basketball perspective. So these are the kinds of games that are good for him to get experience in. I would agree with Green. I thought he did a really good job. Got to the free throw line a few times, a couple assists, just the 1 turnover. And really, kind of takes up for, I think Robert Johnson tends to be the guy who really pressures the ball when he's in the game. And I think it's good to be able to have a guy that you can bring in off the bench that's going to provide the same. Curtis Jones, only 1 of 5 from the floor, but I thought played fairly well, made all 4 of his free throws. So getting Ryan's good graces for that. And, a couple assists there. So I thought those guys all continue to make good contributions. And for as much as we can lament what these games are and are not, it does represent a good opportunity for these guys to get minutes, for them to play with different combinations and see what really works. So, I think that's a positive for those guys. I think they all continue to show some good things, and they can do that in short spurts during games that are going to be a little closer and more competitive than this one. But, for now, to give them some extended minutes I don't think there's anything bad that comes from that.
So let me ask you guys a question. Obviously, we've talked about how many of these non-conference games Indiana has against sub-250 competition. What would be the harm? Let's say this Mississippi Valley State game that's coming up. Michigan State just beat them by 50 points. Indiana's played them a couple of times. We know how this ends. We talked about how important getting minutes in games like this will be for McSwain. Why not just start the freshmen in McSwain and Deron Davis and let them play, 28, 30 minutes in a game like this. Let the starters maybe come in for 8 to 10 minutes, get a little run coming off the bench as a bench guy. Why not try that in a game like this, in one of these games?
Because those starters have earned those spots, I think. I think that it's and also you get those guys used to being on the floor at the beginning of the game when there's no pace, nothing to pick up. You get that group that you have. I mean, I know that Tom Crean changes
just one game. There's there's 8 of these.
Hey, let me finish. These are college kids. Thomas Bryant's earned the right to start. James Blackman Jr. has earned the right to start. Robert Johnson has earned the right to start. It matters to them. It matters to them to have their names in the sheet, to have their names called out over the PA, to go out there, do their chest bumped, whatever. That stuff matters to them. And it shouldn't. It shouldn't. And I've always said, especially in an important game, it doesn't matter who starts, it matters who finishes, who's on the floor at the end, who's the most important guys you need in a crunch time. But to these guys, that is sort of a status symbol, and it does matter to them. And it might be stupid. I get it. But you know what? You don't want to disrupt the rhythm of that. I mean, these guys who start are on the floor. They know each other. They're working together. You need to get them ready to be doing that a bunch during the season. Now, I agree.
I don't think it's stupid. I think that's fine. Let them start, but why not let the other guys play 25, 30 minutes?
Now, that I'm fine with.
Yeah.
But I think the starting is an important designation.
Yeah, let them start. I agree with that.
Okay.
Keep that the same, but then as soon as you start making your first substitutions, kind of do it a little bit differently and let those other guys get 25, 30 minutes and get them, used to it in case they have to do that later this year.
I can see them getting over 20. I don't mean to cut you off, Andy. I'll let you in just a second. I promise. This is me ranting here. I'm on a roll. Just let me go.
Yeah, because Ryan is controlling things here.
No, but I think that I can see them getting over 20 minutes, but let's also remember that some of these guys haven't played together before very much. So, you're still working through. This isn't a team that has Yogi leading it. So you're still getting those guys used to their roles and everything. So I think that that's detrimental a little bit, is taken away from that. But I could definitely see giving these guys like 20 minutes, maybe a little more. And maybe as we get further into this, we will. But right now, I think that the way Tom Crean looks at it is right now we're gearing up for North Carolina. Then after that, we're going to be gearing up for Butler. Then we're going to be gearing up for Louisville. So this isn't seen as like a one long preseason thing. These are short spurts to the big games. At least that's how I see him doing it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, my argument against playing those guys all together would be, what is the scenario at which you're going to actually do that in the regular season? So to me, these games are, there's a lot of things you can do to prepare, but I would much rather they play more minutes, but getting some different combinations with them and the other guys who they might actually play with in the season. I mean, if we get to a spot this year, we're in a Big Ten game, those 5 are on the floor together, something has probably gone terribly wrong, or the people who officiated the Kansas game have shown back up, and Frank Mason has transferred into the Big Ten onto Wisconsin, playing at the Kohl Center, and literally everyone has fouled out.
Damn it! Another Kohl Center mention. How many shows in a row are we going to do with one of those?
I mean, let's be honest, Jared. It's kind of
just trolling Ryan. I'm just trolling Ryan at this point.
It's kind of my thing, dude.
It's like Kenny dying in South Park. Like, it has to happen once every episode.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, that's my biggest argument against it, is there's not really a purpose in playing those 5 guys together for large chunks of time, because that won't really happen. Yeah. But I'd love to see them get some more, combinations, whether it's playing the freshman guards with the, starting big guys, or, mixing and matching things that way. I'm all for that, particularly in a game like that. And Crean talked about after the UMass Lowell game wanting to see different combinations, things like that. I think we just need to see more of it, quite honestly. Or more extended minutes with those guys playing with different people. So that's I guess where I would sit it. But I agree with what Ryan said about the way the schedule lays out. You've got a few of these in between each of these in between each of the bigger games. So I think it gives you chances to work on some certain things and kind of break it up into chunks of bad games and good ones.
All right. Well, I'm glad I posed that question, because you both made great points and you convinced me. So
you can drop that in the Tom Crean suggestion box whenever you want and just throw that out there. Call into the radio show under an assumed name from a small town in southern Indiana. This seems like a great idea.
Yes. All right. So, hey, before we go to last call, one more quick reminder that a great way to support the Assembly Call is by ordering your official Assembly Call t-shirt from HoosierProud.com. I just saw a mention on Facebook. Scott, one of our audience members, ordered his Assembly Call t-shirts. They showed up, so he showed me a picture of it. They look fantastic. And you can find those shirts at HoosierProud.com. So go there. You can check out our shirts, check out their entire selection of unique, stylish apparel that anyone with Indiana roots will love. And don't forget to use the promo code Assembly for 15% 15% off. It's not just the shirts, the Assembly Call shirts. It's your entire order at HoosierProud.com, 15% off. It's a really, really generous deal that they're giving to Assembly Call audience members. So take them up on it. And again, that URL is HoosierProud.com. All right, well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We are wrapping up tonight's show, talking about Indiana's 87-48 demolition of Liberty tonight at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. And let's go to last call. Let's get some final thoughts on this performance. And Ryan, we will go to you first and make sure that we let you finish before we transition over to Andy.
Yeah, seriously, guys, it's just rude to cut people off. I mean, I would never do that. I mean, when have I ever done that on this show? Look, in the end, this was a 39-point victory over a team they were supposed to beat by about this much. I think it was a successful night, but you also come out of it with a lot to work on. And that's never a bad thing early in the season, to come out with stuff you can show on tape, say, hey, look, we won, but here's where the problems are, and this is what we need to work on. And so there's things they need to focus on, over the next few days before the next game, and especially leading into that North Carolina game, which I think is going to be a real test, and maybe will show you how they've improved or stayed the same since the Kansas game. So that's going to be a proving ground. Is going to be playing that North Carolina team that looks very good. So again, a night like this, it's what you expect, kind of, up and down, positives and negatives, but that's what film is for, and that's what practice is for. And it's early in the season, so we're still building. I mean, this is a team that, as was shown last year, the time to judge a team is usually, to start judging a team, is late December, when you start about to hit conference. So it's still a work in progress, and we'll see how much they've progressed when next time they play.
Andy, last call.
I think the good thing, we say this after most of these games, nobody got hurt. That's good. We did have a guy lose a tooth, and I think OG twisted his ankle a little bit. But other than that, I think...
Is OG okay? Max actually had a funny line. He said OG's not hurt. He just got a pebble or a rock in his shoe.
Yeah, I mean, everybody said, he was smiling, talking to, Tim Garl and things like that. So I think everything there will be fine. But I'm looking forward to the game against Fort Wayne. It does give them a road game. I'm not sure it's how much of a road game it's going to feel like. There'll certainly be a lot of IU fans there. The tickets sold out quickly, but I think a cool thing to do, to let IU fans in a different part of the state be able to more easily come to a game, and I think that'll be fun. And IPFW is really, or I guess Fort Wayne now, is the only team that kind of falls in that middle ground. We talk so much about these Big Four games and all the other teams that are terrible. They're the one team on the non-conference schedule that's a little bit in that middle area, and so they're should compete for their league championship. So will be a stiffer test, I think, than what we saw in these last couple of games, and we'll give IU another chance to hopefully get a road win under their belt, which I think is a good building block for the rest of the season. And so hopefully they come out and play well. I think it's funny to think back. We spent so much of the early part of the show talking about how frustrating the turnovers were, and they were frustrating, but it was very much a kind of, like I said, feast or famine. It was all or nothing. I mean, when the offense was clicking, it was a thing of beauty, and they could score whenever they wanted to from almost wherever they wanted to on the floor. So, it's easy to lose sight of that, because I think expectations after that Kansas win have gotten to a really good point. But, a lot of good things did happen tonight, whether that be individually or as a team. I think if they can clean up the turnovers, it's something really to just watch for in these games coming up, and see if they can improve in that area. And if they can, that bodes really well for how they'll fare in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, we have to hope that the 34.5% turnover rate that Indiana put out there tonight, that is the high point, or I guess the low point, depending on how you look at it, of the season. Because I thought outside of that, the Hoosiers showed a lot of good things tonight. I think we talked in the offseason about how this may be a more defensive-driven team than we've seen in the last couple of years. And I think one thing we've learned through these first couple of games is the offense is still going to be fine. I mean, there's no Yogi, there's no Max, there's no Troy, there's no Nick, but there are still plenty of guys who can put the ball in the basket. And so if Indiana obviously just values possessions at some kind of normal rate, they're going to score a lot of points. And Liberty is no great offensive team, so it's not exactly some kind of great bar to measure against, holding them down. But still, Indiana came out and dominated tonight on defense, and that's what Indiana should do. And I think we saw Juwan Morgan start tonight, and I don't know if that is something that will we'll start to see in the future with, and then moving Josh Newkirk into kind of that sixth man role. But I do think as we move forward, Indiana's best lineup is going to be Robert Johnson, James Blackman Jr., OG, Juwan, and Thomas Bryant. Because when you have those 5 guys on the floor, there are 3 plus, possibly plus defenders out there with Robert, who can really, harass anybody in the backcourt, and then OG and Juwan, who can guard basically all 5 positions. And we know that Thomas and James are limited defensively, but when you have those 3 guys with them, it really helps to compensate for some of their limitations. And I think that lineup is terrific. So it'll be interesting to see if Juwan settles in there as a starter or if he goes back to a 6-man role. But I do think that is Indiana's best lineup. And I just think you saw tonight the tone that those guys set defensively when they went out there together is something I think Indiana fans can really look forward to, because whether that lineup starts or they end up playing together and finishing a lot of games, I think they're going to be dynamite this year. And we saw a little piece of that tonight. All right. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Assembly Call. We will be back, of course, after Indiana's next game, which is Tuesday, the 22nd. It is against Fort Wayne. That is a 9 o'clock Eastern tip, I believe, 8 o'clock Central Time tip. That game will be on the Big Ten Network. Should be a really interesting game. James Blackman Jr. going back home to Fort Wayne, a true road game for Indiana. So for a lot of reasons, this is one of the more interesting non-conference games. So should be a good one. Mark your calendars, watch the game, and then join us afterwards for the Assembly Call IU postgame show, because we will be here ready to break down the game. And we look forward to it, and we will talk to you then.